Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are, whatever you're doing, and welcome to another episode of Media Matters for Anfield Index with a little bit of a twist, actually, because we've got a 2-for-1. It's a pretty decent bog-off offer, as they'd say, where I'm from. And we've got an extreme cast where the electric gilet meets the heated knee warmers, ready to give insights, analysis, and answer all the questions I'm going to put to them. It's Lewis, Steele, and David Lynch, who don't really need intro. So we're going to get straight into it, gents. And there's a myriad of topics, so I hope you're ready. I hope you're prepared to answer everything we've got for you. And of course, there'll be a few things coming through the chat panel at the same time. So the first topic, and we don't always get time on the Media Matters shows to sort of go into the media side a little bit, funnily enough, but around tweets, around access and what you put out. So I'm actually going to just bring up a few of the tweets, gents, that you've put on screens recently or put out to the wider audience. And I'll start with you, Lewis, because after the other day, look at that. One part of me thinks with 39 points to play for, Liverpool will absolutely claw back that gap. But I've been at every Liverpool game and seen very little evidence they can or will. 6 wins in 20 absolutely stinks. Do they deserve Champions League this season? No. Pretty honest there. It's just not been the greatest in recent times, has it, in all honesty?
No, it's not at all. It's strange being here on with Lynch, actually. It's a bit like if Messi signed for Real Madrid in 2012 or Ronaldo went to Barca. But yeah, it's almost like he's watching over my every word. But yeah, it's not been good enough recently, especially in the Premier League. 6 wins since September, which is what the best part of half a year away, nearly. And some of those wins haven't been convincing either. I think of the Wolves one just after Christmas. Wolves, one of the worst teams in the division. Certainly at that point, they were in the last 10 years or probably further. And they're not creating chances. They're leaking chances at the other end. The City one, you can always say, it's Man City, they're going for a title. They probably wanted it more. But it was just the way that they sank back after going 1-0 up, and all the vulnerabilities were exposed. And, you know, I'm setting off for Sunderland not long after this podcast, and I'm sort of thinking that's going to be really tricky tonight.
Yeah.
Stadium of Light, they've not lost there in the Premier, they've not lost there for all season, and going back even further, obviously they've not been in the league, but that's going to be a real tricky test because that place at the worst of times is loud, and Liverpool haven't done well in those big atmospheres this season. So let's see how they do tonight, but it's going to be tough.
It does feel like it's going to be a tough one. And David, you tweeted this after the game as well, the City one. Liverpool have lost to worse teams. You could see the flaws during that 35-minute spell. If you're only capable of playing well for that long with Anfield behind you, then you're not going to get fourth. And quite honest there to say, you know, describing it a truly dreadful day. I kind of wanted to ask you a little bit of a media question with this, because you'll get it on social media. On all your platforms, you'll know about club mouthpiece, you know, propaganda and all this type of thing. But you've been quite honest. Like, I think it was important we approach this from a Patch Journo perspective. You sometimes, in Roy Walker style, you've got to say what you see, haven't you? And it's just not been good this season.
I think you've always got to say what you see. I think to not do so, to be honest, to shy away or pretend that everything's okay when it's clearly not, would be cowardly, to be honest. I mean, we are so privileged to do this job, and so, you know, and to get to be around the players and the manager, to be close to Premier League football on a weekly basis is, and I would never ever forget that. It's a privilege. You're so lucky to do it. I would never moan about this job. I absolutely love it to death. So if you have given that privilege and that responsibility, I think you, at the very least, you've got to, you know, the people you are serving and doing this as a job is supporters, and they all have a wide range of views or whatever. So you're not supposed to pander to one of those. So that's not being negative for being negative's sake, or positive for positivity's sake to appeal to different, you know, parts of the fan base or whatever. The best thing you can do, in my opinion, is to say what you actually think and do that consistently, and try not to be swayed by others. It's just genuinely just say what you think. There's got to be a limit to that in that you always have to be fair.
Yeah.
And, supporters don't have to do that. I see some of the things online that we're seeing this season, for me, go way too far and are over the top. But I think as a journalist, I aim to kind of just be fair, to write things in a way that I think if anyone comes back to me on this and questions it, I can absolutely defend it. I can say that this is constructive criticism and delivered in a fair way, taking into account mitigation, etc., etc. So that's how I always try to do it. I haven't seen a lot of good this season. I haven't seen a lot of good, as Lewis alludes to there. This goes back a long way. You could even argue it goes back to the back half of last season. And if you track the underlying stuff there, that's the evidence that underpins the kind of the negative takes, I guess, you can have on this whole situation. So, that at the weekend for me was kind of another example of that, is that, I know there were positives in that game and I spoke about those at length, but I thought, overall, Liverpool, they play well for half an hour out of the game. They deserve to lose it, I'd say. And they had a lot of positive things going for them then, e.g. Anfield, City having a good game, City not being the City we've seen previously. And Liverpool still were beaten at Anfield by City for the first time in a long time. So, my view on that was that's pretty poor, really. And so I shared that view. And I think that's what we always try to do.
Yeah, it is honesty and different roles. I know, David, you've had probably the YouTube a bit longer than Lewis, but Lewis has that distinct thing where players look nervously as he crosses them in the mix zone at the same time. So different roles, and we'll get into certain things as well. One of the topics I want to start on is the clues for the summer, because there's a lot of unknowns, a lot of things we can predict, but there is a few uncertainties there. Lewis, this wasn't even on the agenda at the start of yesterday, but I've just got to bring this up on screen. It's almost jumped to the top what was said yesterday. That quote from Arne Slot, and we'll break this down into 2 points. If we don't have Champions League qualification, then it's definitely not been an acceptable season. When I arrived here, we could only sign Chiesa, and that was after Europa League season. I'm completely aware of that. I want to tackle this second part first of all, because doing it in reverse, but I'll explain why. You probably guessed when you saw that or read that, you were both in the press conference, so we'll talk about that shortly. Was there not a bit of, hold on, Richard Hughes said at the round table a few days ago or a few days before, wasn't it? Like, it was deliberate, as he said in our first season, that coherency, keeping things the same. Those were Richard Hughes's words. Also, both of you, and I even checked, just so I've got the receipts, as the kids say, if we need to prove it. But that summer, Zubimendi, Lenny Yoro, Liverpool made moves for that. Was there not a bit of you, Lewis, that, I don't know, did you raise your eyebrows? Were you thinking, that's not right? What were you thinking when he said that?
Yeah, because it's not. So Slot is basically saying that they were struggling to attract players because they'd just been in the Europa League. But if you're a player, you're thinking about what you're going to be coming into. And at that time, Liverpool had Champions League back. So I don't really buy the argument at all, because, if they said it was 12 months when Slot came in and, they were going to be in the Europa League that season, then maybe a Martin Zubimendi will think, well, is it really worth making the move? A Lenny Yoro or whoever else, can't really remember who else was linked that summer now. Not many, to be honest. It's not like they were not coming because Liverpool were going to be in the Europa League, because they were going to be in the Champions League. So I didn't really buy any of that, to be honest. And a lot of what Slot said in that press conference didn't quite add up to me. And I do think this every week. He does often say, I'm not going to stand there and make excuses, but then he'll go and talk about the referees and the injuries and all these other things. And when you are analysing Liverpool's run, you do have to take into account that if Alexander Isak and all the defenders and whoever else were fully fit all through the season, then I'm sure they would be maybe a few places higher in the Premier League table. And yes, some refereeing decisions have gone against them, but to be honest, I think you can say the same about every club in the Premier League. I don't really buy the whole referee conspiracy thing ever. And you can look at, maybe Arsenal have had a little bit of luck with injuries, but their best player, Bukayo Saka, hasn't been fully fit this side of November. So I don't really buy that excuse really either. You look at, mentioned there, Arsenal, City have not really had Rodri fit all season. They've not had a fully fit defence for months. So every team has the problems with injuries. Cole Palmer's barely been fit for Chelsea. So that was, I don't really buy any of that, to be honest. And the main problem is Liverpool just not playing well as a team. If they'd won on Sunday, we probably wouldn't have been having this debate now. But you dig deeper, they would have won because of one magic moment. That they've not won. I don't think they would have won because of Slot's coached a victory. It's because of one magic moment that Szoboszlai's done. And maybe you could say if Ekitike's header was 2 inches the other way, that would have been a lovely move. But still, I didn't really think they played that well on Sunday, apart from a 20-minute spell. So there's a lot of problems, as I say every time I'm on this show.
Yeah, and I know from your perspective, David, you're always keen to stress, like, we can't overanalyze or jump on every single word. And I get that. It's obviously a pressurized environment. Things are against Arne Slot somewhat. But, I messaged you straight away after he said that about the Chiesa comment. And then it's definitely not been an acceptable season. I'm not saying he's almost hanging himself with his words a little bit, but those two elements, the Champions League, the Chiesa, what's acceptable. Did you raise your eyebrows at all when he's saying that?
I will say on the Champions League comment where he says it's not an acceptable season if we don't qualify, I can't for the life of me understand, and this is a really good example of people jumping on things he says because they don't like him or they've made their mind up. Like, why is that? Why is he wrong on that? He's absolutely spot on. It's not an acceptable season if Liverpool don't qualify for the Champions League. And if he says it is acceptable, he'd be getting a load of stick for that. So for me, that's a really good example of people going over the top. Everything he says is wrong. He was right about that. He's absolutely spot on. It's not an acceptable season if they don't. The hint there is that maybe his job comes into question if they don't, etc. So that no problem with his honesty on that, and he's setting standards there about where Liverpool need to be over the remainder of the season. So I thought absolutely bang on. The Chiesa comment, on the other hand, maybe that is worth a little bit of a deeper look. I thought that was interesting. That's a newsy line to me because. Of course, it contradicts what Richard Hughes said only a couple of weeks ago in the round table, which was that was they actively decided that they didn't want to be too active in the market that summer, and that they wanted the manager to have time to look at what he was doing and what he had. So he's kind of gone against that and suggested that the reason for it was because they'd had Europa League money in the season prior, therefore they weren't able to spend as much now. So that's interesting because it's, as I say, it contradicts what his superior is saying publicly. It contradicts the line that Liverpool have pushed quite hard, quite strongly over the last 12 months or so as well. So that was a little bit of a surprise, and it makes you wonder where the truth is on that. Were the hands tied financially, or was it a decision that they made? We don't know. And does that, if it was a financial decision, does that have implications for if Liverpool are to miss out on the Champions League this season? That is, it throws up questions. And so for me, that was the main line out of the press conference. I thought that was a little bit of a fascinating one, really.
Yeah, I don't know if it caught everyone off guard, but it does raise a lot of questions. And probably the Champions League qualification is the place to go with this, Lewis, because, when you look at the table, it isn't looking too hopeful at the moment. I think it is more hope than expectation for a lot of fans. I suppose one of the things that people have got to ask, and Arne Slot's brought it to the forefront with using that Chiesa reference, is there a concern that there could be almost a black hole in Liverpool's finances, or it's really going to ding us for trying to make moves in the summer?
Yeah, so I spoke to Kieran Maguire yesterday, football finance expert. Articles coming out in about 45 minutes, I believe. He was saying if they don't get Champions League, it's basically you're missing out on up to £200 million, and that's prize money plus commercial revenue plus obviously the gate receipts will be the same in the Europa League and whatever. But the one thing he did say was for every £1 you make in the Champions League, you make about 22p in the Europa League. Okay. And apparently there's some people at Palace who are basically saying you lose out on money by being in the Conference League because it's not a money spinner. And that would just set a club like Liverpool back a couple of years. And they're very well run. They're very self-sustainable. So I don't think it would be a massive long-term issue. But it would certainly be a real dent into the finances. And after spending 450 million, you're sort of mortgaging Champions League qualification for the next few years. I'm not saying it will completely derail them financially, but it would have a massive impact on Liverpool's finances. I do think the table looks a lot better this morning than it probably many fans would have worried it would have looked this morning, because I think realistically Chelsea would have been expected to beat Leeds at home. United, well, they were on a good run. They could have easily won that one at West Ham. But if Liverpool go and lose tonight, then you could look at it and say, well, Chelsea and United have gained a point on them again. I do think, with my rational hat on, that Liverpool will still get in the top 4 or 5, whatever it is. But they have to start quick, because I've just got the fixtures up here. They're running United away, Chelsea at home, Aston Villa away, Brentford at home. Before that, Merseyside derby at Hill Dickinson, Brighton away. There's no easy games. There's some teams as well scrapping for relegation coming to Anfield. They won't be easy either. Teams like Fulham are maybe going for the Europa League. Tottenham are at Anfield. By that point, they'll have a new manager bounce. So there's no easy games coming up. You're looking at Sunderland away, Forest away, West Ham at home, Wolves away, the next 4 in the league. They've got to get 12 points, at the very least 10 points from those games if they want to get in the top 4 or 5 for me. And they're up against it. I do think they will get it, just based on the fact that I think the United Carrick's honeymoon bubble may have burst slightly on that now, and they will naturally just go down a little bit. I don't really think Chelsea are consistent enough to go on a run. But then, as I said in that tweet that you put up at the start, where's the evidence that Liverpool will go on a run?
Yeah. Because
6 wins in 20, they replicate similar points per game over the next 13. They will finish around 8th or 9th, and that will get them in the Conference League at the very best. So something needs to change, and it needs to change quick, because if it doesn't change soon, then there's going to be mountains that they'll have to climb to get in into the Champions League.
Yeah, I'm going to be honest. When you talk to me about those figures, because people have different opinions on where we'll finish, but 200 million black hole, David, and all the different bits there didn't sound for good reading. On the other side as well, because we've talked about players and contracts and different bits, if we're not in the Champions League, I'm pretty sure Alexander Isak and Florian Wirtz didn't sign up to play Europa or conference-based football. Does it become a big ask? Does it become a risk to hold on to some of these players?
I wouldn't think so. I mean, you look at the last time. I think we can fall into the trap a little bit of kind of, being a bit dramatic about this. I mean, United have barely been in the Champions League for the last 10 years or so, and they're kind of signing players left, right, and centre. Liverpool have the biggest revenues in the country at the moment now. That was officially confirmed recently. So, if they can't take the hit of 1 year in the Europa League, then I really worry about how, that's not being sustainable. That's running things extremely close to the line. So much so that if you fall off it occasionally, it's disastrous. I just don't think we should accept that narrative, if I'm being honest. I think Liverpool can cope with this. And I look back to when they were last in the Europa League and they signed Szoboszlai, Gravenberch and McAllister and kind of rebuild that midfield. So they were still an attractive prospect to big signings at that point. They were still able to spend the money as well. Like Lewis is absolutely right. It's a dent. It absolutely is a dent, and a sizable one. But it's one that Liverpool should be able to ride out as well, particularly as they are sustainably run. And so I don't think there should be any big fears about a year in the lower competitions and what that means for the club and the long-term future screwed, because so many sides around them are kind of in and out the Champions League, and Liverpool have pretty consistently been there. So I'm not too concerned about that, if I'm being honest. But of course, they want to get there. They desperately do want to get there. I'll be honest. I hope this is not just being kind of negative about this, but I just have very little faith that they will. I just don't see enough in the form at all. You know, I don't think United are very good. I don't think Chelsea are. I think they've had the little manager bounce now, and maybe we'll see them start to kind of level out. But, you know, even if they do level out, they're ahead of Liverpool, and Liverpool have to be better. I'm not seeing the signs personally, to be honest.
Yeah, well, I hope one of you's right, but it's more hope than expectation, I think, more than anything on this one. And I want to actually go to you for this one, Dave, because we talked about sort of going into the summer, set pieces. We seem to have got a little bit better, it's fair to say, at set pieces since the changes. Arne Slot's talked about it repeatedly. Both of you, we've talked about it on these pods. Is that going to be a real thing for Liverpool this season? As in, not just sticking an advert on LinkedIn. We've got to look at set pieces, getting the right person in, and the change it can make in the point. Surely it's got to be a focus this summer.
Yeah, 100%. They've got to get someone in, because I think you've seen, I mean, they have slightly improved, which, I mean, God, it doesn't reflect particularly brilliantly on Aaron Briggs, you have to say, in terms of what he was producing in that role. I mean, it seems, you know, on the face of it, he was almost a net negative in that, you know, Liverpool are slightly better defensively and slightly better in terms of attacking them. Now, there may be some variance being involved there, to be fair, in terms of, I think they were maybe underperforming XG or overperforming versus expected goals against, and maybe a bit unlucky at times in terms of what they were conceding from them. And that looks kind of leveled out a bit. But also they do look better from attacking set pieces as well. So it just kind of, it throws up those questions. But the 100%, the thing to take away from that is that they absolutely have to get someone in. They are so important. And, you know, say Liverpool were Arsenal level at set pieces this season. This sounds like a joke, but I genuinely mean this. Even with all the problems that they've got, they would be in the title race if they were Arsenal level at set pieces, because the goal difference between the two sides is roughly equivalent to how much better Arsenal are at set pieces, or it certainly was 2 or 3 weeks ago. So that tells you everything. You can almost put together a title charge on the basis of set pieces this season. And if Arsenal do win it, with all their problems with open play creation, which 100% their supporters may wish to deny, but it just definitely, they do exist. That's how important set pieces are, that they make Arsenal a title challenger rather than a side that would be floating around where Liverpool are. So, you know, you need that kind of extra bit. You need that cutting edge, and you need that little advantage that it gives Arsenal. Liverpool have got to do everything they can to seek that out for themselves.
Has got to improve at both ends and be far better by the end of next season coming as well. And I suppose other things that we have talked to you both about on the pod, Lewis, the physicality element, I'd probably say, because we talked about Liverpool have got lots of technical players, but set pieces, long balls, it's those, of course, the issue. Maybe the second ones it's right to talk about. So you're thinking, will Liverpool be looking for a physical element in the summer? But then you're both in that press conference the other day where Arne Slot talks about, actually, you know, if we can get footballers and we can get them up to the physical demands, which doesn't strike me as, I'm not saying he's looking for yard dogs or groks or anything like that, but not everyone will want to hear that we've got to put another 2.5 kilograms of muscle on a star player or anything like that. Do you think we are going to be looking for similar profiles, or will they seek physicality in the summer?
Yeah, it's interesting, because if you look at Liverpool's team, aside from the two centre halves, and I've made this point before, they're actually quite a small team.
Yeah.
When you compare it to the two teams going for the title with Arsenal, pretty much all of their players are 6 foot or above, maybe not the wingers or Zubimendi. City, you've got Donnarumma, you've got Haaland in there, heading, Ruben Dias, Rodri, all big lads. Liverpool don't really have that, and that I think that played a big role in the set piece problems at the start of the season, or the first half of the season as well. But I do think there's a belief that this sort of switch to a more direct league is more of a blip than a long-term trend, and I don't think that it's going to suddenly go back to, you know, Stoke, West Brom, Tony Pulis, these sorts of teams. I don't really think it's going to go like that. But I think a lot of the lower league teams, are not lower league, mid-table teams that are exploiting the big teams this season, have that big, brutish style. Brentford, these Leeds, who have been really good since about November onwards. Leeds are a massive team. and as we've seen, Liverpool have played them twice and not beat them. Brentford, obviously, Liverpool went down there and got absolutely battered. But I do think it's not so much about that in the long term, because you should have players that can do it all. The one I look at physicality-wise is not the new players in Wirtz and Ekitike that everyone talks about, but McAllister. The games are just passing him by. And this is a World Cup winner, one of the best midfielders in the Premier League over the last few years, not just at Liverpool but at Brighton as well. He looks like he's just been drafted into the Premier League this season, and he's never played a game. And the problem Liverpool have, he needs a rest, but he can't get one because he could, because Curtis Jones exists, but Arne Slot seems to have forgotten him the last month or so. Probably going to be at right back tonight if I was a guessing man. I haven't seen any team leaks or anything. I would probably be going for Curtis Jones at right back tonight, just because. Is it Taibbi, the winger for Sunderland? He would give Endo a terrible time with his pace. So, I mean, the whole midfield seems to be just lacking a bit of physicality, and you never really thought that last season, because Liverpool would have so much control in games. Now teams have worked out how to wrestle back control. Slot almost needs to, reset everything and think this is how we're going to play, because right now he doesn't seem to know what he's doing to get the best out of this bunch.
Just to come in on that, sorry, because it's an interesting one. I wrote a piece after the defeat to Newcastle last season in the Carabao Cup, where I said I really thought that one of the big focuses of Liverpool's summer would be that they would sign physical players. You don't have to turn into Arsenal and be all kind of set piece focused, but just to be able to cope with it a little bit better. And then he just really kind of didn't do that. I mean, Ekitike is a big lad, but he's not like massively physical in terms of getting up and winning headers. And pretty damning statistic from the weekend is that City won 13 aerial duels to Liverpool's 3, so 81% versus 19%, and that's Man City, by the way, who they play this nice football, and Pep Guardiola is not all about physicality, even though he adds it through his teams. I thought that was pretty interesting, really. So it's 100% it's something that they need to address this summer. They just need to add it in certain positions, I think.
I suppose on that then, because I mean, you've both watched it, you've both covered it, written about it in different ways. We're all familiar, David, with the round table, what was said, but I actually totted it up, and actually, if you bring Richard Hughes, Arne Slot and Billy Hogan together, the phrase long term is mentioned 9 separate times. Do you think, with what happened in the summer, I know it was a huge outlay, 450 million, give or take a few quid, but do you think this was always supposed to be a 2-part rebuild? There was more physicality, or has this just been more planned, do you think?
I think they probably accepted that this season wasn't going to all be kind of smooth for them, because they've made so many changes, and that they probably were going to have to leave themselves a couple of things to do, because, they mentioned a lot. And this is one of the reasons I don't think they should be kind of bashed over the head for the spending, and why kind of this idea that if they miss out on Champions League, well, they spent all that money. Well, they did get a lot of it back in, didn't they? They recouped an awful lot of money. So the spend's not as big as it looks. And it's not just saying that to kind of excuse them in any way. It's just actually factual. But yeah, it leaves them with a little bit more to do going into next summer, which you would like to think if they might have had an idea in the summer what that would look like. I'd like to think if there wasn't physicality at the very top of the list there, then things have been altered a little bit, because it's just so clear that needs to be part of it. But as you say, I think they accepted it was going to be kind of, this little bit of a transition season. I think the big problem is that it's got quite as bad as it has. I think even in a transition season, the floor of this squad for me is not to be finishing 7th or 8th. I think the floor should have been to be finishing 4th. And obviously they're struggling to do that at the moment. But yeah, I think the long-term plan, if it didn't have physicality involved in it, it should do now.
And I suppose, speaking of physicality, Lewis, because I'm going to be honest, you annoyed me when you tweeted this out last night, but it was obviously part of the embargo. Luis Diaz gets mentioned, and very pointedly, Arne Slot says, just I was paraphrasing what you put here a bit, that actually there's no other Premier League club would do this, but it's the right thing to do. The nature when we get an offer, the length of contracts, etc. But I don't know whether he was asked because you're present or specifically mentioned Luis Diaz. But what did you take from that discussion when you're in the room?
Yeah, so the question was, do you think you've missed Luis Diaz this season? And Slot, sort of didn't really answer it yes or no, which means the answer is yes. Because he's not going to suddenly come out and say he's missed Luis Diaz, because that's harsh on Cody Gakpo and the other forwards. And there's two sides to the coin where, yes, what was it, around 55, 65 million is a very, very good deal for Luis Diaz at the age profile he is, regardless of how he's ripped things up in the Bundesliga and done very well for Bayern. And there's also the fact that at the time, I think they maybe thought that Rio Engamo would have played a little bit more than he has done. I think the lack of minutes is more down to fitness and not wanting to push him too much. We've seen a lot of young players break through. Stefan Bajcetic, Kay Gordon, Jadon Dans have all had really nasty problems with maybe doing too much too soon. And I think that's why he's not had as many minutes. I don't think it's purely down to ability, but maybe, Slot's massive on the stuff that maybe we don't see, the off the ball stuff that we're not all experts in, shall we say. But it's undoubtable that they've missed Luis Diaz this season. I think the main problem is last season, if Cody Gakpo had 2 or 3 bad games in a row, on the bench you go, mate, in comes Luis Diaz. If Luis Diaz has 2 or 3 bad games in a row, off you go, in comes Cody Gakpo. Now, Cody Gakpo has no... Rio Engamo has stood 50 metres behind him, whereas Luis Diaz was right down his neck, breathing down his neck, saying, if you have a bad game, I'm right back in. And they could rotate it, and obviously fitness has been an issue there as well. So I think I was on here in August, and I said then I think they're a forward light, because I don't, as bad as it sounds, I count Federico Chiesa as half a forward when you squad planning, because Slot doesn't. And that's not based on my opinion of Chiesa's ability. It's based on what we, reading between the lines, can work out what Slot thinks of him. And Slot clearly doesn't rate him, or he would have played more. And to be fair, when he has played, he's not really done that much, apart from a few little cameos at the start of the season. So I think a forward's got to be, alongside a centre-half, which you've sort of done with Jeremy Jacquet, has got to be top of the billing list for this summer for me, because Cody Gakpo, probably a lot of the stick that he's had in the last 2 months has been unfair, although he's definitely not exempt from criticisms, because he's been far from good enough. What was it, 2 goals in 15 or something similar to that? If there was a good enough forward, I'm sure he would have been on the bench, but there isn't a good enough forward. Hugo Ekitike's been absolutely brilliant, but he needs a rest every now and then. Mo Salah has been poor, and it seems like it's one pole or the other with Salah. It's either off you go, mate, you're on the bench, you're not coming on ever again, to now you're going to play every 90 minutes every single week. It would be nice to just have a little bit of rotation, and there isn't that. So I've gone on a bit of a tangent there, but the conclusion has to be a forward must be top of the list in the summer, and I'm sure they're already drawing up those targets now.
Yeah, pace is definitely needed in that. And I suppose the final one that is the ultimate question at the moment, David, that everyone's talking about, of course, we've talked about it many times, but Arne Slot mentioned it, and I think this was distinct in the embargo. So I've got your esteemed colleague's tweet on the screen here saying, the only thing I do know is that it happened before and recently, referencing Jurgen Klopp in 22-23 when he didn't get Champions League qualification, and it didn't affect the future of that manager, but that doesn't guarantee anything, of course. In general, managers at this club are not judged on league finishes, and at some clubs, they also look at the progress the players make. The progress, the teammates, the circumstances are sometimes taken into account. I've talked to you both before about mitigation and analysing every factor, even recruitment, the style of play, everything that's happened in the summer. It's quite distinct what Arne Slot said there, though. What did you make of those comments?
I think what it does show you that there's been this kind of thing on social media where everyone's like, oh, well, he's safe for now. That means he's safe in the long term. It's just not been true at all at any point that they were like, oh, he can just get whatever results and performances till the end of the season and there's no chance we'll sack him. It's been obvious for a while that this is a trial period, and he kind of has to prove some points, I think, in this period that, this can be a springboard to next season, that Liverpool can be better and that he's showing improvements. I mean, what he's right to say there is that, it's not just solely if you get in the top 5, you're fine. If you don't get in the top 5, if you're gone. They'll read the whole picture. And that might mean, actually, by the way, that they do sneak into the Champions League and still Liverpool go in a different direction. Because what's interesting here is that Slot has 1 year left on his contract at the end of the season, and he can't, be very surprising situation if he goes into the final year as a manager. That doesn't tend to happen. They tend to say to the board at that point, are you going to back me or not? Let's make a call, and we may have to go our separate ways. So there's a decision looming there in the summer. And I think in the build-up to that point, he has to make a point. It's not just, Champions League qualification will be one factor of it that they'll look at and they'll say, well, that was good or it was bad. You did or you didn't get there. But also they'll say, these are the underlying numbers over the last 12 months. Or Wirtz got better as he developed under you. You did a good job with that. Or, you didn't use the squad widely enough. Or, all these kind of positives and negatives will be thrown together. And it's kind of a wider picture that they will look at to make the decision. And also, by the way, who else is out there? And do we think they would do a better job? So that is all part of it. And not all of it in Slot's control, but an awful lot of it, he is able to control, which is results, outcomes, and process. They both have to be, for me, they're the kind of two main things really that he's got to be able to get right. And so I think what he clearly needs over the remainder of this season is an improvement in both, is that Liverpool start playing better and picking up better results. And if he does that, it's far easier to make the case then at the end of the season that you should keep your job.
Yeah, without doubt. And I suppose the final one, Lewis, for clues going into the summer, your good friend Virgil van Dijk, although good friend's probably stretching it, but you do stop him quite often in the mix zone.
I'm not sure I'm his good friend.
Yeah, really. Having a chat with him. But he talked the other day in the mix zone, those comments were released, that this season, he used the phrase, a transition season, which, you can make a case for everything that's happened without doubt. I suppose, though, going into everything going forward and clues into this summer, fans aren't really going to accept another transition season, even though there is a possibility it might happen again.
I don't like the phrase transition season, even though I do use it sometimes myself. Man United have been in a transition season every year since Ferguson left. And there comes a point where you just have to think, what's going on here? Spurs are in a transitions. I can't even say it now. In one of them every single year, it seems like. And I always think you never hear people in August when everyone's saying, oh, who do you think's going to win the league this season? It's very rare that you hear people say then, oh, well, I think Liverpool are in a transition period. It's normally used as an excuse or a mitigating factor around this time of the year when it becomes evident that they're not going to win the league or they're not going to achieve their goals in that season. Liverpool had won the league, 15 points clear of Arsenal?
Yeah.
Probably, if it wasn't for winning the title so early and they sort of all went to Ibiza for a month after, they would have won it by 20 points, if not more. They followed that up by signing the best young midfielder in the game in Florian Wirtz. They signed Alexander Isak, one of the best two strikers in the Prem aside with Haaland. They've signed two new fullbacks. And, they've signed one of the most up-and-coming strikers in the Bundesliga.
Yeah.
All the players that have gone weren't the main players. So if you take all those things together, yes, there would need to be a bedding-in period for the new boys. But this is a team who won the league at a canter and have got stronger. So I don't really buy the whole transition period thing, because I think that when you've spent so much money, okay, yeah, they've recouped money, and it's definitely not the 300 million that Slot keeps mentioning. It's more towards 240, 250, I think, which is a big difference. I don't really buy the fact that you can call it a transition period, because they've won the league so well, and they've only got better technically. Whereas realistically, they've just gone completely fallen down the cliff. And there are mitigating factors. There are some excuses which are fair. But to be this far behind Arsenal with, a third of the season to go is not good enough. I think, if they were 6-7 points behind, we can all say, oh, fair enough. They've just had a little fall off. But it's not been a little fall off. It's been a complete capitulation. So I really think that when you judge an Arne Slot, you judge him on his 18 months. He's won a league and then he's had a terrible, terrible season, which he said has been the worst of his life. You've got to take those two things together. You can't take either of them separately. You can't say just because he's won the league, you can never criticise him. And equally, you can't say just because of this season, he has to be sacked straight away. You have to take them both together. And that's why I tend to sit on the fence, because I can't make my own mind up. And it does change week to week. Sometimes they'll beat Newcastle and I think, okay, they'll go on a run now. And then they'll lose the next game. And I think, oh, how bad can this get? So let's see what happens at Sunderland tonight. But I think if they lose, it could turn really toxic again.
Yeah, which could well be a principle that we're going to talk about in our final topic, which I'll come to you for this, David, because we use this phrase quite a bit, churn. And I know it's never your favourite change or phrase, particularly, but we're starting to get a bit of clues into the summer. We're thinking about who's going to go, who's going to stay. I mean, the first one, it's important to say, Jeremy Jacquet coming in for a fee which could rise, we believe, to around the 60 million market is what we're told. And the suggestions were that Chelsea were in there as well and other clubs. But part of the attraction for Liverpool is Jeremy Jacquet's coming to be a starter, shoulder surgery permitting, etc., for next season, isn't he?
Yeah, I don't know out and out starter in terms of he's guaranteed to start every game alongside Van Dijk. I think he'll play an awful lot of them, but obviously, there's going to be competition there as well. I think that's the idea. In the same way in theory, they would have liked to have had Gay and Canate battling it out this season. I think they want healthy competition at centre-half, which has kind of been lacking absolutely this season. But I think he's guaranteed to get more games than he would have at Chelsea, without doubt. So that's, one signing you're looking at. You're probably looking at another centre-half signing on the basis Canate goes. As you say, there's more churn to come because we've talked already. Lewis is right. I think they need a pacey attacker. Absolutely. I think, midfield, slightly worried about the Curtis Jones situation. Doesn't look good to me. And looks like they'll need a replacement there. So again, you kind of can talk yourself quite easily into kind of 4 or 5 signings again. And, if signings are what give you a transitional season, then Liverpool are going to have another one next season as well. That's the worry. So, they just need to be bedded in quicker. It needs to work quicker. I don't think Liverpool can have 2 seasons off in the way that, they completely have this time around. So, that's a little bit of a concern about it, really, is the amount of business already that you expect that they're going to do.
Yeah, it is a concern. And Lewis, I know your male paymasters or a train might not wait for you, so I'll give you one more before you've got to head. In terms of, David's alluded to it there, probably other centre-halves. You mentioned the wingers, Adam Wharton and others that have been mentioned as well. You do feel that it is going to be maybe not as many ins as outs, but a lot of business, a lot of churn are really, you're feeling it, aren't you?
Yeah, well, there's a lot of question marks over some players that are already here as well. Canate, is he going to stay? We don't know. Salah, what's going to happen with him? Every day there's a different report about the Saudis lurking, and I'm sure they are. It's just we don't know what Salah wants to do. Curtis Jones, we know there was interest from Inter in the winter market. Will he want to, challenge himself pastures new? Andy Robertson's probably going to leave. Alisson's future's not wholly certain, especially probably will do another year, but that's not guaranteed. So that's 5 players I've just mentioned. That's before you get into, the sort of the squad players like Chiesa. I'm probably missing Endo. Simicast will be coming back. So there could be 6, 7, 8 players leave, as well as everyone would love Adam Wharton or a midfielder like that. But you think that England are in a World Cup, he's not going to come anything under 80 mil. And even if Liverpool are interested, they certainly won't be the only ones in that queue.
Yeah.
And given the season they've had this season, and given the fact they might not be in the Champions League, why would Adam Wharton choose Liverpool over a, City or Arsenal or Chelsea, for example?
Yeah.
Whereas last season you think, yeah, Liverpool's the place to be. Suddenly you look at it and think, is it? And that's going to be a factor with all their transfer recruitment this summer. But yeah, it's going to be a big summer of change. Winger, defend. Well, obviously Jacket's already in, but depending on Konate's future, Gomez's future, they probably need another one as well. And then I think they need a midfielder, and then they'll probably need a new left back when Robertson leaves. So it's not going to be a quiet summer by any means. They're not going to spend 450 mil again, but I think they're going to have to spend at least 200 mil, because that's not to say they're going to do massive 100 million transfers again, but you don't get any good players for under 50 million these days. So it's going to be a big summer again.
It does feel like it's going to be a big summer again. And in terms of if there is that Champions League hole, I suppose, David, you'll have seen all the stories. We've talked about this, Mo Salah to Saudi. But, and I want to choose the word carefully here, do you think, and we're talking Richard Hughes, Michael Edwards, they may be thinking, actually, do we have to look at sacrificing the big names, and we can get money from Salah, Alexis McAllister, Alisson could still fetch a pretty penny, at his age and that type of thing. Do you think that will come into the mix of it to fund the next stage?
Yeah, but I don't think they'll feel like they're doing it against their will. I think it would feel like a natural conclusion. For example, if Alisson were to leave in the summer, it feels like that's, there's been clubs sniffing him around in the last couple of summers. So, and it would feel like a natural time to break, because I do think his kind of, the point at which he was superhuman is maybe slightly behind us now. And so Liverpool can move forward. Mamardashvili was signed for this job as well. So, with Mo Salah, it seems to be reaching a natural conclusion as well. I think his powers are waning. As much as he's been one of the greatest Premier League players ever, probably gets into the all-time 11 for me. But his powers are waning. So, and there are funds to be raised there. So it might reach a situation where it benefits everybody. Alisson doesn't want to be second choice. Salah wants to play every week. And probably can't do that in the Premier League anymore. So I think, we can over dramatize it and say it's like, oh, they've got to push these guys out the door. But I think it probably is reaching that point naturally for a lot of them, to be honest.
Yeah, could well be with their ages. And I'll give you an out, Lewis, because I know you might need to nip off. Have we got you for 5 minutes, or do you need to depart? I don't want to hold you against your will, as it were.
I'll do one more answer, then I'll go, because I've got to get to Sunderland. Got to get to my
one more answer then, and we'll focus on the youth side a bit as well, because I wanted to talk about maybe the lack of use of kids. You mentioned Rio Ngamoa before. We maybe thought Train Ione might get more minutes. It was interesting. Rob Page talked as well, the under-21s, that he wasn't in a brilliant place before the January window as well. Surely, ultimately, for next summer, we can't have another situation where we're asking these questions about the young talents in the squad. Why aren't they being played? Are they ready? It's got to be resolved before then, surely.
Yeah, I do think maybe that these players are not quite ready for the first team, but they're probably too good to go out on loan, or too young to go out on loan, maybe. I do think that there has to be patience with the likes of Rio and Trey. And I think even being around the first team will do the world of good this season, even though, it's been quite negative for most of the season. But yeah, I think we would want to see a bit more of those next year. But then it's like, if they sign a winger, how does that impact Rio? Do Liverpool look at that and think maybe he needs a loan? I personally would think it would be better for him to stay put at Liverpool. But then you think he's played 1 or 2 games for the under-21s. He's played about an hour in total of Premier League football this season. Surely that can't be good for his physicality, the fact that he's only playing, he's only playing competitive football on average once every 3 weeks, really. So that, I'm not sure how that has an impact on him in the long term, whether that's good or bad. But yeah, it would be nice to have a bit of clarity on those youngsters. But apart from them two, there's not really anyone knocking on the door of the first team, really. There's obviously high hopes for a few in the academy, but it's not like there's 3 or 4 queuing up to get minutes this season. So I don't really think you can. I don't really buy the whole why doesn't Slot play Calvin Ramsey? Why doesn't he play, whoever else? Because I don't think they are good enough for this team, even though the team's been in a bad state. But yeah, it would be nice to see Rio, Trey, especially maybe even Dan's if he can come fit, because he would have played recently, I think, given Isak's injury. It would be nice to see them step it up a little bit in fitness and also minutes next season.
Yeah, there we go. Although we nearly got through the time with Lewis without Calvin Ramsey catching strays, but he got one in at the end. So I'll let you depart, Lewis, as I ask the final question to David for this. I suppose in the summer, the focus is going to be the head coach, how it's going to work, and that situation. I suppose the final one, we're talking about churn and recruitment and all these issues. If it is a Xavi Alonso, whoever else comes in, will Richard Hughes, Michael Edwards be thinking, we're buying for that coach? Or will it be a case of, no, this is our plan, this is what the coach has got to work to?
No, you know that the model here is that they buy players for the team, and Liverpool's kind of idea of how they want to be set up as a football side. I think that's why, one thing you can say about last summer is maybe they left themselves short in certain areas, but they've not bought a bad player. I think that was a good summer in terms of the quality of the signings. Like, I know Isak, it's been kind of unfortunate how that's worked out, but I'm pretty sure he will prove to be a really good player for Liverpool, and the others have just undeniably been really good. So I don't think that who's the head coach has any influence on it. That's why they kind of stick to this model. So I think, if it is Alonso, if it is Slot who's going to be going into next season, they'll know the areas the squad needs improvement, and those are the areas they will look to address within a certain game model, which is they want to be aggressive in the press, albeit that's not worked that well this season. Yeah. They want to be dominant in possession, and they want to be able to unpick low blocks. All those things are what they're looking for.
Yeah, there is a lot to sort in the summer. There's a lot to sort right now. As we say, Arne Slot is on trial. God knows what Sunderland tonight will bring. All it leaves me to say is really, I suppose on behalf of both, because I know Lewis had to run to catch his train, so we appreciate that extra time. But for coming on, for sharing the platform, and for answering all the questions, David, as ever, is massively appreciated.
No, thanks for having me. Always a pleasure to spend time with you and Lewis.
Yeah, not everyone's idea of a dream time, but there you go. And ladies and gents, with Sunderland in a few hours, that was another Media Matters for Anfield.